Your Own Job, aimed at providing you with resources and assistance to start your own business. Focusing on customer benefits, analyzing the marketplace, financial forecasting, financial assistance, creating your own job.
Welcome to the Tampa Bay Community Network series on creating your own job. We have a great panel of experts here to help you get advice on how to start and grow your business. The topic of today's program is building a successful team. My name is Mary Key, and I'm president of CEO Florida Forums. We help leaders and organizations grow. We have a great panel today. To my left, going to my right, we have Pearl Para, and Pearl is a growth accelerated services consultant for the Small Business Development Center at the University of South Florida. We have Dr. Jody Tompson. He is the head of the Nomoli Institute on Strategy at the University of Tampa. And we have consultant Michelle Royal, who started How Do You Innovate, which provides consultancy as well as one-on-one support to startup businesses here and abroad. So welcome to our show, and thank you for being here today.
Thank you. Thank you.
With the subject being team building, I think an important first question is, what goes into being an effective team? What are the characteristics of an effective team?
There are probably hundreds of books that have been written about team building and forming teams and making teams more effective. And I think there are, even despite all that research, there are a lot of things that are still overlooked. And in my experience, seeing companies in this area, I think there are some things that I've noticed that are probably important that don't get mentioned a lot. Probably the most important that I see of all is a simple matter of trust. If you're on a team with people who don't have a solid foundation of trust, then it really prevents almost any kind of strategic thinking from happening, because the time you spend with those people won't be productive if there's not a foundation of trust.
The rest erodes when you don't have trust, doesn't it?
Well, it undermines everything. You're right. It does. It does. I see also a common problem where people on a team don't really share the understanding of a unified goal. You know, a lot of times you'll hear maybe on a football game, a team who loses will blame the kicker for missing a last-second field goal. But really, it's not the kicker's fault that the game was lost. And teams are the same way when they're in organizations. I need to understand that the whole team wins or loses together, and the kind of American individualistic sort of I'm in it for myself can really be a problem in teams, because it really violates the whole principle about why teams are developed. They need to help and share the goals rather than working independently. So those two things come to mind to me for really important parts of building a team.
Oh yeah, I think piggybacked on that is a system of communications. Define what your communication system is going to be and how you will communicate. A lot of times companies that start out do team building activities where they actually maybe do some assessments like MBTI or Colby, learn about who they are so they can celebrate their differences and learn how to communicate. A couple of the companies that I worked with prior to SBDC, I did some coaching with an entire group, and it was a medical practice. And of course, the office manager had a different concept of what was important than the nurse, than the physician himself. And the ways they communicated, their feelings were a lot different. Well, once they understood where they were coming from their communications, they were all able to function so much better. And the difference in the productivity in the office just increased tremendously.
Great example.
Building an effective team is serious business, and I love how we're diving right into the light topic immediately as far as trust and communication, which is never really fun to talk about in business. In business, we're typically concerned about product development and serving a customer. And when we get into these topics about trust and communication and common goals, it can get really uncomfortable and a bit convoluted. And I love in our discussions about high-performing teams focusing on positive ways to do that, where the individual owner of the business has to get clear about their own vision and their own personal mission and be able to communicate that to other people. Because a lot of times entrepreneurs, we're really charged with a lot of thoughts of what we think things should be. And I love the discussion about assumptions, because those assumptions can create a lot of roadblocks many times. So really focusing on the high-level mission, vision, values with your key team. And the key team is going to change, and hopefully we'll get to some more discussions about that, what that means as you grow, what your team looks like. But I think the discussion about trust and communication and having a system, an effective system, an easy system to go into is important. And you're not alone as a business owner. You're not alone. Everyone goes through this process.
Well, to your point, Michelle, I think a lot of entrepreneurs, I know sometimes I'm guilty of it, think that the people that they work with can read their minds.
Right.
And so that alignment with where are we really going and what's my role in it. In fact, Harris Interactive did some studies a few years back where they found, shockingly, that about 19% of the employees in a company really understand the goals and directions of where the company's going. So it's important.
Yeah, I have to go back to the trust issue. I think some things we forget are the issue of keeping our small promises. How many times have you said this kind of thing to somebody? I'll call you later. And that was just a way to say goodbye or this conversation's over. But really that was a promise you just made, isn't it? And I think we do things like that all the time, and we don't recognize that that is a way to destroy trust between people, because maybe that person heard you say that and they're waiting for the phone call, and it never comes in. And so you've sort of destroyed a little bit of trust, even with that offhanded remark that way. So I think we need to be really careful about the small promises we make to people, because that's one way that trust starts to erode within companies, within teams.
Well, what are some of the best practices that you've observed as you've worked with entrepreneurs or startups that you might want to share that our viewers could benefit from hearing about?
I do a lot of research on businesses that really transform from the startup stage to what might be considered an American dream success. And Zappos is one of those companies. We have other companies locally that are also some really good examples as well. And what happens in their transformation as they are building a team is they really focus on what's the one thing that they're good at. What can they do that only they can do? So they understand their strengths, and then they're able to assess their gaps. And the small business support services have a lot of different tools that you can provide those evaluations, and you can trust that as an entrepreneur. You can trust those evaluations. If there are gaps that have been identified, accept it and learn how to build or hire to that. So that's one thing. The other important aspect of that is when it comes to gap, we think a lot of skills gap. There's also culture and service gap. And Zappos, which is a company that built from a simple idea and had to transform its business model and its team over the course of 10 to 15 years, is considered one of the best companies to work for. They receive 1,500 applications every month for jobs that are paying about, anywhere from $15 an hour to, some executive positions. But they're receiving a lot of applications because there's so much of a magnetic attractor. And it's because this company has become very clear about who they are in their mission and their vision. They share that. They are very clear about their values, which are the behaviors, how they act towards each other as well as to their customer. And they're very clear about what they do best, and they do it better than anybody else. And I think that's important as a best practice.
That's an excellent example, because if you think about it, Zappos is in the shoe business. It's a commodity. And all the competition out there for a commodity, how do you separate it? And those are great examples of how they did that.
Yeah.
Are there ideas on best practices that you've observed?
I think another thing to think about is we immediately think of team as our internal team, our employees, our managers, but generally an entrepreneur starting out doesn't have employees. It's themselves, maybe their spouse, maybe a few family members or friends. And so you can still build a team. It's just an external team. You're going to have a CPA, you're going to have attorneys. SBDC is a great place to come and help find those things to build a team, because we have a number of professionals that can help you do that. So I would say that don't limit your thoughts to, I just need to hire people to be on my team.
Right.
The team can be bigger than that.
I know in our work, we provide CEO roundtables, and so usually the companies are over $1 million and probably up to $150 million in size, and it's lonely at the top. And these CEOs come together once a month for about a half day, and they just focus on each other's business issues in confidence. So having an external team that isn't an overhead that you're taking on is an important aspect.
That's good.
I wanted to, if I can, just build on the externalization of the team when you're in startup. I'm an entrepreneur that created my own job and in an emerging field as well. And part of my external team are strategic partners, other people who are doing similar and supportive type work. So there's a lot of different ways that I can provide additional services or more value to my customers by the people whom I align with. Mm-hmm. And the term alignment, I think, is really important as well, because whether you're hiring a new employee who's going to be working with you 40 hours a week, or you're hiring a strategic partner, having alignment as far as your own value behaviors, your own values, your own mission, your own vision, that's a conversation. It's not a first date conversation necessarily, but it is a conversation that needs to happen about the second or third time that you're going into serious partnerships. The same can be true for your bankers and your CPAs and any other mentors. You want to align yourself with people who are either achieving what it is that you want to achieve, right, or who are going to add value to your business, your customer.
Well, I can hear the most cynical entrepreneurs say, all right, I've got limited resources, I've got limited time. This all sounds great. What do I do? What are my options? Where would you get started? Well,
that's why I was brought in today. I'm at the Small Business Development Center at USF. And the Small Business Development Center, if you don't know, is actually funded by the Small Business Administration, the SBA, and USF. So our consulting services are of no charge to our clients. We do have training courses and everything from starting your business to financial intelligence, and very, very low fees for those type of things. The program that I've been involved with for the last year is called the Growth Acceleration Services, and we actually go in and do a health check, review the entire business and come back with a report and give them recommendations of where they need to work. Now, we don't necessarily then come in and assist them in doing that. That's where they may need to find another team member, but we can help them find those things. So the great thing about the SBDC is whether you are in what we call pre-venture, you haven't even started, you just have this great idea that you want to take out and do something with. There's a team there of accountants, bankers. We have people that know the trademark laws and those type of things. We have HR people. We have just a wealth of resources, and whether you have just a couple questions or you need hours of our time, it's all available. So don't let not having the dollars stop you from coming and finding out.
That's great. And I know at the Namoli Center you have a strategic initiative where an entrepreneur can come in and have their business analyzed by MBA students?
Yes, we do. At UT we have a similar program, although it's not really for entrepreneurs as much for established companies. And every company that signs up will get a team of usually 5 MBA students assigned to it. And they work in the context of a course in the business school. They're working with a professor to analyze the company's strategy and work on recommendations and solutions that they think the company should consider going forward. So we do this for between 10 and 15 companies every single semester in the business school at UT. And it's a great source also for companies that know they would like some outside influence and some ideas from objective third-party people to come and look at their business. So it's a good resource for the community as well. And it's been operating for, I think, 12 years now. So it can be very helpful.
Great.
Yeah.
So one of the things we already talked a little bit about, but it seems to shape the most successful organizations, and that is establishing a culture. And of course, as you build a team, internal and external, you begin to look at, okay, where do we go next? So then strategy kicks in and the focus and fulfilling the vision. But how do you build a culture? How does that work? And where does team building come into play with that?
I worked with a local company called TimeDog.com. And this was a startup company that was initializing an idea. And it's a service that helps busy moms. And what the company started off as from a concept to what it is today is very different. However, the key differentiator for him, for Matt Cherry, the owner, is he wanted to build, regardless of what the service was, around the culture, the internal company culture. And so we spent a good amount of time together hashing out what that meant. And we actually followed the guidelines of Zappos itself. There were a lot of great questions in the Zappos book on building culture. And because it was a limited resource kind of scenario for the startup company. Totally a lot of fun, and it's a working document. It becomes a living document. And everyone who's hired goes through an extensive 30-hour plus interview, regardless of where they are within the company. And if it's not a culture fit, they're not hired. And that's a testament, I believe, of the entrepreneur's character, that he's committed to the culture first, because he knows that when the culture's right, the service will follow. And there's been some great examples, obviously, for entrepreneurs to follow that model. And I think that it's just a good way to move forward.
Yeah, that's kind of like Southwest Airlines when they made having fun and people who could create fun a requirement of the job. So if you don't have a sense of humor, you can't work at Southwest.
Right. And I think it's important to remember, and what sometimes is forgotten, I think every organization will develop a culture, and sometimes it happens almost by chance or by happenstance. But unless a leader really imposes his or her will onto how the culture develops, and it will develop on its own. And sometimes it ends up in a place where we don't really like, and we wonder, how do we get such a poisonous culture here? Well, once it's there, it's very hard to change, and so it's much better to be proactive instead of passive, and say I will force my culture to look like this, feel like this, act like this, because if we don't, they end up in places we don't like. So it's a great example of saying I will make sure that people fit into this culture, because if they don't, then it's hard to claw it back once it gets out of control.
It's an interesting diagnosis. Sometimes entrepreneurs think they need a better team, and really it's more about becoming clearly defined about what their values are, what their value behaviors are. Collectively, whenever you have an established team, it then becomes an organizational change problem that's being solved versus hiring new talent, because the new talent will adjust to the behaviors that are currently living within the company. And that happens whether it's 3 people or 300 that are in a company.
I've had the opportunity to work with a company that's a local company, My Matrix, and they actually take their core values and they've created behavioral interviewing questions to get at whether or not in an interview a person really can demonstrate that they hold those same or similar values, because they want the culture to fit. And then you get an extreme example like Zappos. Zappos actually will pay people $2,000 after they've gone through their
leave.
Is it a 6-week program, Jody? Something like that?
It's a 2-week program.
2-week program. Oh, see, it's even more expensive. They'll pay them $2,000 to leave if they feel like they won't be the right fit. Now, that's not a suggestion for a startup, obviously, but that is a way to build, a following over time.
Yeah, one of the things too that small entrepreneurs starting out, when they start to really grow, they start out with the family culture, because normally it is a tight-knit family and friends. And if a small business doesn't keep in mind this is a business and we need to implement personnel policies and communication policies and systems, just like a large company, that culture develops. And an experience with a small company that grew very rapidly, and the owners were very open about everything they did. Well, eventually the employees started seeing things the owners did and making judgments, and then making behaviors and comments based on those judgments. And it did poison the culture. And so that, I think the caution that I would give is starting out, even if it might just be you and a spouse or you and a friend, think about how you're going to go ahead and create that culture. Don't wait until you grow. Do it before it happens.
Yeah, to your point, I think people really need to set limits about what are we going to accept and what aren't we. And usually entrepreneurs get really busy, so that focus on, we building the right culture, it's not there because you're looking externally, often sales-driven, beginning of growth.
I think it's also difficult because, no matter how much we talk about interviewing policies and procedures, to build a culture, you've got to know what you believe in, what's your worldview, what's your value system, what do you care about, and you've also got to know your own strengths and weaknesses. Because if you're not really clear on those, I think what ends up happening is you end up hiring people who are just like you, and yeah, they hold your values, but they don't challenge you, they don't question you, they don't bring up new ideas to you, and so you have a bunch of clones of yourself, and we all know that limits the diversity and limits possibility for innovation. So it's a sort of, you can fall off the road on either side very easily. You get trouble on either side. So it's hard, it's very difficult.
Yeah, diversity is linked to innovation.
Yeah, I was going to, in the development of innovation teams, a great book that I read years ago was IDEO's The Art of Innovation, and they lay out the kind of diverse team that's required to develop innovation. And sometimes entrepreneurs are taking advantage of innovations in the sense of making them profitable, and other times they're really active in the creative process that is providing either innovative service or products to a new market. And you have to have a team of diverse experiences and backgrounds and education and skills to be able to work collaboratively together. And I know we may talk more about what makes the most effective team. Collaboration probably is one of the keys to an effective team. Can they collaborate in hearing ideas, providing ideas, giving feedback, building on each other's ideas? What's the common language? And I love the idea about whether you are intentional or not, a culture is being developed. So culture is happening.
It is.
Whether or not you are intentional about it. And if you have a specific goal, then you must get clear about what that goal is as far as the cultural development, where the gaps are. It seems so simple, talking about it seems so simple to say, all right, here's where we're really strong in that, here's where we're really weak, here's where we're going to make some improvemans. And one of my favorite innovation, I'll stop here, one of my favorite innovation tools is a 15-minute meeting. It's actually for people who are in programming. So computer programming, and it's a very quick meeting process to get teams aligned on a daily basis, and they ask 3 questions. What are you going to do today? What did you accomplish yesterday? And how can I help you? So 3 very simple questions, and I think that is so important. It puts the focus back on checking in versus managing crisis.
Exactly, and accountability.
Yeah.
The other thing that comes to mind, and maybe you have some thoughts on this, is what is the organization rewarding and recognizing? I can't tell you how many companies I've seen that say we want collaboration, and when you look at how people are rewarded monetarily and not, it's for individual performance. And so any observations on the kind of reward and recognition that might drive good teamwork and collaboration?
Well, it's hard work to set up compensation systems that, obviously we don't share a paycheck. We have to have individual paychecks.
Right.
But it's hard to come up with metrics that measure individual contribution to a team project. But it is the right way to do it. I'm not competent to tell you formulas or techniques for doing that. Right. But it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of insight into who contributes, how they contribute, and then how to tease out the individual pieces of that.
There's another piece that you have to consider when you're looking at sales performance and revenues, and maybe salespeople or marketing people, you have a direct measure. It's the type of areas like HR or maybe the accounting department. how do you measure them? They're contributing to the team, they're providing information, they're providing support that the marketeers and the salespeople couldn't sell without the appropriate amount. So sometimes I've seen companies do actually company-wide bonuses to everyone based on the overall company's performance. And in sales organizations, I've seen where regions get a certain amount of bonus and then it gets divvied up between the regional areas.
Right.
So it encourages salesmen in one area of town to support the salesmen in the other area of town and not work against each other. So those are a couple of the things that I've seen happen.
Yeah.
When we're discussing the teams and team building and culture development, it's really about not only identifying values, but feeling valued, which is what you're discussing, which is how do we feel valued and how do we value each other? And there are, when it comes to monetary compensation, which is one way of showing that you are valued, it's there's profit sharing systems that even some franchises have started to implement for the individuals who are from management to the hourly wage, the minimum hourly wage, that they're given the opportunity to share in the profits. To get back to Zappos, they focus on how many people served. We've reached 1 billion people this year, and they get perks as a company. The company provides more perks to them, which is amazing. So you are valued and you are practicing our values.
Well, our time is coming to a close. Celebration is a way of recognizing too. I know a local entrepreneur, when people reach their goals, they cook a steak and egg breakfast for the employees. So there's a lot of non-monetary ways of doing that as well. Thank you so much for your insights today and your experience. I know our viewers will really benefit from these ideas. And thank you to our listening audience. I also want to encourage you to please come out and check out the facilities here at the University Mall. There's an opportunity for you to learn how to do this type of programming as well as participate in it. And the staff here is terrific. So until next time, best wishes to all of you.